In this series, we are exploring the true story of real-life maverick John Boyd. In part 1, we learned about how he became the best air-to-air combat pilot in the Air Force, earning himself the nickname 42nd Boyd. In part 2, we saw him confronting careerists as the Mad Major. But in this video, we will explore the mathematics he developed to revolutionize how the Air Force and the Navy evaluates aircraft. Comparing aircraft at the time was not easy. They had several factors to consider when criticizing aircraft, and no two aircraft were alike. You could fly them against one another, and they often did. But even this created a mystery. For example, how were the F-14s, the naval plane from Top Gun, and the F-86s that John Boyd flew after the Korean War consistently able to defeat the Soviet MiGs with a 10-to-1 kill ratio, when everyone knew that the Soviet MiG was smaller, faster, could pull tighter G-forces, and more maneuverable? Now, the theory at the time was that American pilots were just better trained. America, duh. But John Boyd was not satisfied. Boyd began studying the different criteria by which aircraft were evaluated and thought back to his days at the Air Force Fighter Weapons School at the Nellis Air Force Base. He tried to think about how and why he was able to outmaneuver every other pilot. Boyd's key insight was that the key factor to any series of choices a pilot made came down to one thing: the energy needed to perform or switch maneuvers. Some maneuvers, like going into a tight turn, climbing, rolling, pitching, they all cost you in terms of airspeed, altitude, or some combination of the two. In other words, energy. Energy quickly dumped could not quickly be regained. The weight, size, shape, and mechanics of the plane affected how quickly one could get to an advantaged position over his opponent. Boyd needed to calculate how much energy was gained and how much was lost by each plane from each flying position, but the math of his energy maneuverability theory was a gargantuan number cruncher that required millions of calculations. The only way to do these calculations was with a mainframe computer. But in the early 1960s, computer calculations were slow. Computer time was expensive, and Boyd had no budget. And as if that wasn't enough, the aeronautical engineers were not interested in the inspiration of a dumb fighter pilot with an icky industrial engineering degree. To make matters even worse, Boyd had no right to design airplanes. At the time, he worked at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, where rednecks tested bombs designed by others, as opposed to the airplane designers who worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, the home of the Wright brothers and the mecca for aeronautical engineering. For a man like Boyd, there was only one thing to do. He conspired with a friendly administrator to steal thousands of hours of computer time by making it appear that the computer was being used for something else. Much to the dismay of the autocrats at Wright-Pat, the Mad Major's theory of energy maneuverability, from then on known as EM theory, turned out to be a stunning success. And later, when they tried to court-martial him, he simply pointed out the fact that he had tried to get the computer time, and they realized the optics might not look good if they were found trying to court-martial the very person doing their job that they should have been doing. EM theory provided a universal language for translating tactics into engineering specifications, and vice versa, and it revolutionized the way we evaluate tactics and design fighter airplanes. Boyd's new EM calculations eventually helped them to redesign the F-15, and was the foundation upon which Boyd designed the Air Force's most successful prototypes, which became one of its greatest planes, the F-16. But even by Boyd's newer measurement factors, the MiG should not be losing out to American fighters nearly as often. After analyzing all of the data, doing his own research, and remembering his own experiences as a flight instructor, he figured it out. To find out how, let's read an excerpt from the book. Boyd pored over the notes again and again. Could there be something else? Some other element, perhaps an element not covered by EM, that held the answer? Boyd made a list of attributes of the MiG and the F-86. For days, he went to frequent trances as he groped for the answer. In the end, he came up with two significant advantages the F-86 had over the MiG. First, the F-86 had a bubble canopy that gave the pilot a 360-degree field of vision, while the MiG pilot's view to the rear was blocked. Thus, the F-86 pilot had a much easier time observing his enemy than the enemy had observing him. Second, the F-86 had full hydraulic controls, which the MiG did not. This meant that the F-86 pilot could control his aircraft with one finger, while controlling the MiG was so difficult that MiG pilots often lifted weights between flights in order to gain strength. The unboosted controls of the MiG meant that its pilot grew fatigued more quickly than the F-86 pilot did. But far more importantly, the F-86 driver could go from one maneuver to another more quickly than the MiG driver. In a practical sense, this meant the F-86 pilot could go through a series of either offensive or defensive maneuvers quicker than could his adversary. And with each maneuver, he gained half a second or a second on his enemy until he could either break for separation or be in position for a kill. The MiG was faster in raw acceleration and in turning ability, but the F-86 was quicker in changing maneuvers. And in combat, quicker is more important. Thirdly, the Americans were in fact better trained. They were taught to respond to the constantly changing situation and respond dynamically as opposed to the Soviet doctrine of tightly controlled, pre-planned engagements. This insight also became the key part of Boyd's later work on military strategy. These advantages, better observation and greater agility, would make the lightweight fighter an even more extraordinary aircraft. This concept of agility was an intimation of what in another few years would be the best known part of Boyd's legacy. Boyd also rewrote the Air Force's book on air-to-air combat. After these monumental contributions, he began to think about thinking and creativity itself. He read widely, discussed new ideas with his colleagues, and developed a series of briefs that implemented a far more dynamic war strategy than the static doctrines that were taught at the time. The two most important briefs were titled Destruction and Creation, as well as Patterns of Conflict. In the last and final video, we'll explore this newfound strategy titled How the US Marines Rewrote War Strategy, the Modern-Day Sun Tzu. If you like to win, and let's confess, we all like to win, then you will probably like my video essays about competitive strategies and game theory. And game theory, if you don't know, is the use of simple logic games to find winning strategies in a competitive market. I plan to make more videos discussing the prisoner's dilemma, collective action problems, and the economics of creativity. If that sounds interesting to you, and seeing how you made it this far, it probably is, then be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get a notification when my next video drops. And be sure to watch the last and final part 4 of this 4-part series on John Boyd, the real-life Top Gun Maverick.